You're listening to Seraphina Speaks for Children Who Think, the show that delivers you my take on topics that are important. I'm your host, Seraphina Melina Durbin. Let's go right ahead to the show, shall we? Hey, it's Seraphina. Today we're talking about being happy to be different. First of all, what does being different mean? And why do we try to not be different? What's the opposite of different? I guess it means blending in. Hold on, I'll find a definition for that. Word Hippo online says that the opposite of different is same, alike, identical, and similar. Then the other most important part, being happy with being different. That seems to be like a holy grail for lots of grown-ups who pay money to feel more at peace with themselves. The self-development industry is booming. Being happy to be different is such an important subject for us all to think about before we mature into adults, which is why I wanted to bring you this episode today, and it's one I've thought about loads in my life already. I first began thinking about the idea of being different when I realised I am different from others. It's when people kept on asking me this question, what's it like to be a triplet? Or they screech and ask questions about being a triplet. I didn't know being born a triplet was pretty rare. By the way, about 1 in 8,000 births are triplet ones, whereas being a twin has become much more common. Although multiple births are on the rise, because of fertility treatments, there's been a decrease in births involving 3 or more babies. As a toddler, I have memories of people honking their horns and shouting from their cars as Mama pulled us along in our choo-choo train. This was 3 little carriages. It was so sweet. We stopped being in that when we were 4.5 years old because we got too heavy to pull. Being a triplet is different for others, but to me it's all I know. Then again, I get asked what it's like to be in a family with 10 kids. Us triplets are the youngest. I've got 6 brothers and 3 sisters. I don't think anything of it. What's it like to have just 1 sibling? Wow, that must be something. People have this idea that we shout goodnight to one another from our beds. We've been known to do this, but not too often. And they also imagine we have photo shoots, where we stand in height order, like the Von Trapp kids of the Sound of Music movie. Last time we did anything like this was for a shoot Mama had for an exhibition on working mothers that was shown in the House of Commons. It was great fun and Dickie the Dachshund also featured in this shoot. There are so many benefits of being in a mega big family, but this show isn't all about me. Let's move on to the general idea of being different. What does it mean to be different? I'm going to take us to the opposite so we can find out more. Bear with me. How many times have you felt like you are the problem? That you are different and things would be easier if you changed to fit in? I've noticed it's hard to be different when people say they like something or someone and dislike some things and some people. Or they choose the same clothes and say they hate others. Or there's ways of speaking that people say is the right one way to talk. I noticed this when I went to school. There are right ways to dress, speak, and be. When we're around people who decide on the way we should be, we have choices to make. I guess it's about how strong our need to belong in a crowd is. Or, because I live in a house surrounded by sheep, I see the way that they like to follow each other. Sheep flock together and have hierarchies within their flock. They huddle close together, and separation from their flock causes stress and panic. It's sometimes the same for humans as we're growing up and finding out who we are. Sheep mentality is known as herd mentality in humans, and it's when we flock like sheep, subconsciously following a minority of individuals. It's how people can be influenced by our peers to adopt behaviours both offline and online. If we're like sheep, we all behave in the same way, or all behave as we're told, and cannot or will not act independently. The opposite of herd mentality is individual thinking. When humans think for ourselves, it means we make independent decisions. Instead of a flock, we become a community of individual people being ourselves. But is it safer to belong to the crowd rather than stick out in some way by being different? Let's look at the difficulties in being different, because that will tell us why we try and not be different. Being different can be difficult. First, society has expectations and norms. This podcast is all about these norms, and it's these that often dictate behaviours and appearances that are considered acceptable. Straying away from these expectations can lead to judgment, criticism, or exclusion. The fear of not fitting in can create a sense of isolation, making it hard to appreciate our specialness. Second, there's a human instinct to belong that can make it hard to stand out, stand up and be different. We seek out connection and acceptance from others, and when we go away from the norm, there's a risk of feeling disconnected from people. There's pressure to conform, and this can be really intense as we're growing up. Our peers, that's our friends, can try to sway us into being like them, and the wish to fit in is strong. In so many ways, I find this interesting, as I've a lower need to fit in than I hear about. Whether that's now being home educated, I don't know. But I just don't feel this intense pull to being the same as other people. I'm relieved about this because it seems to cause a lot of problems. When we return, I'm going to cover two of the biggest problems with trying to be someone we're not. Most of us have tried this out. Next, info on a podcast I listen to and love. The Activators is a podcast that celebrates and amplifies kids who are activating social change by doing what they love. Although there are no new episodes from 2022 on, it's a gem of a podcast. Just listen to this clip from Leo, the host. You'll get a good feel from hearing his voice and hearing what he says.
Welcome to the Activators! A kids podcast about activism. I'm your host, Leo Abelo Perry. On this podcast, we want to celebrate and amplify kids who are activating social change by using what they love to spread more love. Social change means providing opportunities for people to recognize what's wrong in the community and do something about it for the betterment of humanity. But first, how are you feeling today? On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being things are rough, and 5 being you can't even imagine how good you're doing, I'd say I'm 4. No matter how you're feeling, it's all okay.
What's not to love about Leo? This was him back when he was a bit younger. His interviews showcase great kids doing big things in the world, but they show off how he's willing to be different too. If you think you'd like to listen to The Activators, I'd recommend diving into the episode where Leo interviews CJ Matthews of Blankies for My Buddies. What's lovely about this episode is how Leo and CJ talk emotionally together. I admire the way CJ is making kids' lives better after his experience of losing his baby sister when his mum was pregnant. Let me know how you get on with The Activators. Leo stopped podcasting 2022 to become an actor. He can be seen playing Luca in the Disney adaptation of Cheaper by the Dozen, Chip in Beauty and the Beast, and young Justin in The Big Leap. He's 11 and one to watch. The two biggest problems of trying to be someone we're not are big. They're serious, and I think we need to avoid them. The emotional toll. Trying to be someone we're not takes a toll on us emotionally. Suppressing our true self and conforming to external expectations can lead to internal conflicts, stress, and anxiety. It's a strain to maintain a facade to fit societal norms or please others. This leads to disconnection from our true emotions and desires. Over time, emotional suppression can lead to mental health challenges, such as depression or an identity crisis. The questions, Who am I and what do I want? Come from years of practice of trying to be someone we're not. Loss of authenticity and fulfillment. Pretending to be someone else is about sacrificing ourselves and truth fulfillment. When we morph ourselves to fit certain molds or meet external expectations, we risk losing touch with our passions, values, and goals. From here, life can be unfulfilling and lacks a sense of purpose. Authenticity is linked to personal satisfaction, and straying from our true self to conform to societal norms can lead to a feeling of emptiness and dissatisfaction in the long run. This emotional toll and loss of satisfaction in life sounds awful. And the thing is, it's a slow slide into all this as we try to be someone else rather than ourselves. But what if you being you, exactly as you are, with all your uniqueness, is what the world requires right now? What if your difference and your willingness to be yourself, no matter what, is what the world needs? Easy to say, but how do we decide to be ourselves rather than be like the other people around us? I asked Isadora, a new Seraphina Speaks correspondent, about how she's different and what makes her happy to be this way.
Hi, I'm Isadora, and I'm happy to be different because of my sensitivity. I've always felt very emotional and sensitive since I was a child, and so much so that I was called over-emotional or too sensitive at times. I've never known another person that cries as much as I do, but I'm happy to be this way now that I've grown up and I've realised that my sensitivity isn't a weakness but a strength, and it's helped me to be more empathetic and also become more in line with things that I care about. For example, being vegan and being a strong animal activist comes from my empathy, and perhaps I wouldn't be so passionate or care as much about animals and if I wasn't as sensitive. So thank you for having me on the show, Seraphina.
It's special to hear Isadora talk about her crying and her sensitivities and how these led to her activism in the world. Thank you to her for coming on the show and sharing on how she now sees these as strengths. Isn't that wonderful? Oh, and I forgot to say, Isadora is one of my big sisters. I'm so incredibly proud of her. Aren't I the luckiest person to have her as a role model in my life? Being not just okay in ourselves, but full on at peace happy means questioning things society has told us, and our families have told us, and our friends have told us. We need to ask if we agree with what they expect or suggest, and whether we want them to tell us how to live or think. This can be hard as we're growing up, as we do need to think carefully about our safety. This has to be a priority, as sometimes we might not like what people tell us, but things mustn't endanger us. I see this as a given, and something obvious for us to consider and make sure of. To move towards being happy as a unique individual, we need to shift our perspective. Instead of viewing differences as obstacles, we must see them as strengths that contribute to our whole life. Diversity makes the world rich and vibrant. What are the first steps towards being at peace in ourselves? In a world that encourages conformity, being different can be met with resistance. However, the path to genuine contentment lies in celebrating our individuality and finding joy in being unlike others. Acceptance is the first step towards happiness in being different. Acknowledging that not everyone will understand or appreciate our uniqueness, and you know what? That's perfectly fine. Instead, we need to focus on self-acceptance, which means embracing aspects of ourselves that make us stand out or just us. For example, if you're a regular listener, you'll know I have difficulty in saying some words. My vocabulary is wide, but I can't actually say some words properly. My family and I have a giggle about this, especially as I'm a podcast host, where words are important. I'm not letting this part of my neurodiversity hold me back. And in a moment, I'll return to more about being neurodiverse. When we're comfortable in our own skin, the opinions of others matter less, and our happiness becomes resilient. Part of this resilience is about having strong self-confidence in our abilities, appearance, and opinions, and this shields us from the effects of external judgment. I find affirmations help. Simple ones like, I choose to be the architect of my life, really help keep focus. This might sound a bit daft, but affirmations are better than sentences that start with I can't. Also, surrounding ourselves with positive friends and other influences lifts us up as individuals. We need friends who celebrate diversity and encourage us to be ourselves. Then we have a sense of belonging and understanding, but not because we've become sheep. When we define success on our own terms, what we dress like, what we do with our lives, for instance, we can be happy. If our lives are in tune with what we believe and what we want for ourselves, then we can be happy being different. Let's hear from my trusty triplet brothers, who will have a view about what makes me different. Montgomery, what makes me different?
That's easy. You eat pasta cheese all the time, and you're a podcaster. Oh, and you eat crisps with ketchup, which is weird.
Yum, you're right, I eat a small repetitive range of foods. I like what I like, I know what I want. How about you, Horatio? What do you think makes me different?
Your hair makes you different.
He's right, I've got hair that poofs out a lot. I think it's stylish, and yes, it's different. Brothers, they're such characters. I wanted to say brothers, they're such imbeciles, but seriously, that's not the whole picture. Before I close out this week's episode, I'll share a clip from a podcast called Talking to Teens. The host, Andy Earle, is in conversation with his guest, Selena Rezvani, author of Quick Confidence. Let's listen in.
I'm here to tell you your first draft self or your teenager's first draft self is enough. Of course, we all want to be improving and working on things and building our awareness. But I think it's so important to instill in teenagers who are putting themselves in new situations that you are enough as you are. And so some of the ways I encourage people to feel more confident in those first impressions. One is what I call the dog principle. So what I mean here is being willing to be the first, to go up to somebody and say hello, for example. Because think about it, when you go to someone's house with a dog, the dog doesn't sit in the corner and overthink it or talk it over with their friends first, right? They come right up to you and greet you. And there's a lot of power in that when instead of maybe overthinking it, saying, I wonder if that person will come up to me, that we initiate. We say hello. We walk up and say hi. And it's amazing how much we can improve our social confidence when we make that habit, almost like a standard, so we don't even have to think about it. We just go and say hello first. So what I'm asking you to do is do you. Double down on those things that make you you and look for environments that celebrate that, not just tolerate it, but celebrate it. We need to bring that empathy for how hard that can be to stand in your authenticity when it doesn't fit maybe the normal mold. And I think we need to celebrate people who do it, and not just have what I call hero stories that are about, the majority or the socially favored, more dominant type or group, but to celebrate those people because look, when they're authentic, they kind of may not even realize it, but they're giving a little permission slip to other people. You can be yourself too. And that's kind of this beautiful cascade.
I'm going to use the dog principle next time I need to meet new people. I adore Selena's advice so much. What are the situations you could use her advice in? I'll practice starting conversations, even though this can feel pretty weird sometimes. I hope you will too. The way you feel fits with you best. Whatever you do, make sure you walk your own path. Let me know how it goes at Seraphina@seraphinaspeaks.com. Listeners, look out for the micro behind the scenes episode on this week's topic. In this short bulletin, I talk about something I'm worried to talk more about, so I'll share my worries about it in that little space. Bring your kind self to listen to that episode, please. If you'd like to get more involved in this podcast, why don't you join my correspondent team? All you have to do is post a review for the show on your fave podcast app. Then take a screenshot and send it to me at Seraphina@seraphinaspeaks.com. Then I'll be in touch with you about being on the show. By the way, if you're looking for an idea of what to say in your review, if you're like me, you go blank, even though you want to do this. Here's a question for you. Let me know what country you're listening from and what you'd like me to talk about in a future episode. Next week's episode is called On Questions to Ask Tweens and Teens. It's a big topic, but I break it down in ways I think are hardly talked about. I guarantee I'll bring an authentic me-ness to that episode. In other words, it'll be different. Thanks for listening, everyone. Remember to tell your friends, family, and teachers to listen into if you think they'll enjoy the show. Take care, everyone. Lots of love. Wow, I hope you enjoyed the show, everybody. If you like what you hear, click the subscribe button. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Don't forget to leave me a review at iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts, because then more people can find my podcast.